How's everybody doing? We hanging in there? A little heavy? So I'm going to make you feel just a little bit heavy for a minute more, and then I promise we'll be done. Okay. I think all of these stats that Ken was just sharing, it hits a spot that we don't realize until we see them, where we go, oh, there's a lot of pain there. We want to say tolerance and acceptance is necessary, but when you look at some of these things, you don't see people that are thriving. Maybe they do for a season. That's real. There is something about all of a sudden people are coming out and they're experiencing a level of freedom because they feel like I'm being known, which is a key thing there. Is we need to be known. We're designed to be known. But we look at the long-term effects, the long-term stats, and it's kind of a painful and depressing future in the end. So I'm going to just jump into kind of cracking the door a little further into what a person is really looking for when they're navigating this, and what are the things we need to be aware of. You'll hear more of my story this afternoon, so I'm not going to get into that today. But what is a core desire? Core desire for a person navigating this experience is to be fully known, to be accepted, loved, and valued for who they are. Sound familiar? It's a human experience. We're all looking to feel loved and valued and accepted for who we are. And their experience looks a little different than ours does because of, like Ken was saying, the environmental factors that led them to the place that they landed. But at the end of the day, I just want to be valued. I want to be loved. I want to be known. But there are people who have experienced a pretty significant amount of injustice in their life. We didn't even talk about the amount of abuse that happens within this particular people group. I'm not going to say that it's in every time someone has some kind of abuse in their past. That's not true. I have friends who have experienced LGBT that never experienced forms of abuse, but there's a pretty high percentage of people that have experienced some degree of abuse in their lives, and it's an injustice. It's something that was done to them, and unfortunately, that injustice has often happened at the hands of the church. I can't tell you how many friends I have who were raised in the church. They knew Jesus from a young age. They found themselves with these experiences, and the church didn't have answers, or the church didn't respond well. We have, the church Kathy Grace was in at first that said, okay, great, we've heard about this, see you later. So we have to keep that in mind, especially when we're watching them scream about the pain that they're experiencing at the hands of the church, the rights they're demanding. We have to recognize they've experienced pain. They've legitimately been wounded. If we don't keep that in mind, then we dismiss the pain, and we lose any chance at partnering with the process that they're in. Any chance of building with them, any chance of actually seeing the Lord break into their life, because we start to become the very people that aren't representing Jesus well, that they've been offended and hurt by. So we have to stop for a moment and go, okay, maybe my church didn't hurt you, but somebody did. Somebody wasn't a good representation of Jesus. We have to engage with that side of things, otherwise we'll always miss it. One thing Elizabeth says all the time is justice for the LGBT community is restoration. They're looking for, first it's marriage rights, then we want to have children. They're looking for a human experience. And they're not finding it because restoration is how we find that. They're left in huge amounts of emotional turmoil because they didn't find what they were looking for, and they actually found connection and community within the LGBT community. They didn't find it in the church. They didn't find it in their communities at home, maybe not even in their own families. And as a result, they're looking for, where's my home? Where are my people? Who's going to love me? Who's going to value me? And they find it with people like them who have been wounded and broken. Oh, there's so much I could say. Okay. And I want to pause for a minute too, because I think, wow. I think there are people here who, whether it's a family member or a friend or your own story, you're hearing all of this and you're going, what about me? What about my friend? What about my loved one? What about my story? Where's the hope? This can feel heavy. This can feel overwhelming. And I just want to say, Jesus is going to meet us in the journey. That's what he does. We've got a team of people over here who all had Jesus meet us in our story. But I just want to pause and say, you're allowed to feel where you're at. You're allowed to be where you're at. I don't want your pain to feel dismissed. It's real. It's so real. Yeah. And I just want to say, in all of this, as you're hearing things, even things that maybe trigger off a little bit of a painful spot, maybe bump up against a bee sting, if you're feeling a little bit of that, all right, I'm out. I'm done. I'm not coming back after lunch. Like, come talk to our team. Come say, hey, I'm feeling some pain over this. We'd love to stop and just engage with your heart for a minute. Listen to your story. Listen to the pain. Tell you how much Jesus cares about you. Because that's the reality of all of this. Jesus sees right where you're at, and he still looks at you with love and compassion and care and value. He's not put off by your mess. Like Cecil said, he'll chase you into your darkness. Like, he shows up. That's what he did in my life. He was around every single corner. Even the days I was like, I'm going to go find trouble. I'm done with this. See you later, Jesus. I would have people who didn't even love the Lord telling me that Jesus loved me. He'll meet you where you're at. He's not afraid of getting a little bit of mud on him if it means pulling you out of the mud. He loves you. He cares about where you're at. He's not put off by it. So a couple common misconceptions that we'll talk about. Again, this is really valuable if we're going to be walking with anybody navigating this experience. I think it's really important that we realize what's actually going on beneath the surface. And we're going to get into how do you walk with someone specifically this afternoon. But for now, what do you need to know? First off, it's not a choice. This isn't something that people wake up going, today I'm going to be gay, or today I am going to be a woman. It's not a choice. You find yourself with your attractions. All of us, we hit puberty, and all of a sudden we're noticing whoever we're attracted to. It's not something that we think about as, oh, here's who I'm going to choose to be attracted to the opposite sex or the same sex today. It's just what we find ourselves with. And actually, if you dig into childhood attachments, which I would encourage you to go research a little bit of, you can actually see where failure to securely attach to the same sex causes a level of connection with the opposite sex. Sometimes this was my story. I didn't feel connected or attached to the men in my life. Felt like men were unsafe, unreliable, and so I didn't connect. I didn't bond with men. My closest friends were women. And what happens is you hit puberty and you become attracted to the mysterious other. But if you haven't securely attached to the same sex, and if you did what I did and you become securely attached to the opposite sex, the mysterious other is no longer the opposite sex. The mysterious other is now men. I don't understand them at all. Women, I get. Best friends, not that hard to understand, guys. It's really not that big of a deal. But only because I spent time connected on that level. So as you look at childhood attachment, you can actually start to see a little bit of a pattern going into how attractions are formed. But it's not a choice that people will just go, here's what I'm going to be today. It's not necessarily a lack of spiritual maturity. or a lack of intimacy with Jesus. They're not just rebellious people seeking to live contrary to the Lord. You have that sometimes. Sometimes there's a lack of spiritual maturity. Sometimes there's a lack of intimacy with Jesus. But particularly for the ones who are raised in the church, sometimes their experience actually drives them closer to the heart of Jesus than the average person in the church. That was part of my experience as well. I was raised in the church. I loved Jesus. My attraction to men caused me to go, Jesus, help. I leaned in closer, and I still had my ups and downs with the Lord as a result of that. But sometimes this experience actually drives a person deeper into the heart of the Lord. They may know him better than the average person showing up at your church. So you can't just assume you don't know Jesus. You have no history with him. You clearly are immature in your walk with the Lord. There are going to be areas of immaturity. We'll be real clear on that one. We will have areas of immaturity. But sometimes we love him more than anything else. We just don't know how to reconcile what we're experiencing with our faith, with what's happening in our hearts. Ken already talked about the science side of things. It's not a gay gene. It's not necessarily a need for an exorcism. Sometimes there is demonic involvement in anything that we navigate. And so absolutely, let's pray and cover people, set up those prayer times, but we can't promise that something's going to change. And actually, the church has done a lot of harm because of that. They go, we're just going to pray for you, and then everything's going to change. And we still need you to pray for us. Please take those times. But we want to keep engaging with the heart. Keep going. Okay, we're going to pray. We're going to ask the Lord to do battle on your behalf, to chase out anything that the enemy's bringing against you. But at the end of the day, I'm not going anywhere. At the end of the day, I'm here. We're going to keep talking about it. Let's just see what happens. But if we start making promises we can't keep, we're always going to see pain and hurt happen. It's why you have countless people saying, you can't pray the gay away, because they didn't experience that. The church said, oh yeah, this will work. We'll just get Sister Karen to pray for you over here, and then you'll be good to go. Doesn't quite work like that. Now, sometimes it does. So pray for people, that's what I'm saying. But don't assume that that's going to fix their issue right there. One huge thing I just want to kind of comment on too is attraction in and of itself is not sin. Sometimes we, particularly for me, I interpreted the attraction I was experiencing as sin. I'm like, oh, God, take that thought captive, forgive me, I'm so sorry. When in reality, the attraction isn't sin. What I do with it is what determines sin. Whether or not I choose to partner with lust is when it starts becoming a sinful thing. You know, we don't look at the guy in the room who notices the gorgeous girl walk in and go, oh, stop sinning. If he goes, oh, I had a thought I shouldn't have had, great, let's talk about that, let's deal with that. But attraction itself, or even our temptations, are not necessarily sin. Again, what do we do with it? Do we act on that? Do we engage with that in a way we shouldn't? Couple things that are just not helpful as you're walking with people. We'll get into what is helpful this afternoon. But I'm going to slide this in here real fast. And I think we're going to give you guys a couple of papers that I sent you as well. So some of this information you'll find on there. But a couple things that aren't helpful is somebody comes and shares with you, and then we tell the whole community about their struggle. And sometimes that's really subtle, the way we do that. Sometimes it's I need to tell this person so that they're aware and can be sensitive and helpful. But then I'm going to tell this person so that they can also be aware and helpful. And then it's like the whole church knows, and the person feels really exposed. Do I really want to keep sharing? Do I really want to keep showing up? Everybody knows, everybody's treating me differently, not trusting me, what's going on? So we only want to tell the people that are helpful in the process. Who's actually going to be part of the solution? Who's actually able to partner with this person? Who needs to know versus who doesn't? And if you're not sure about that, talk to your pastor first. Another thing we've got to make sure we don't do is we don't want to react as if their experience is bigger than any other experience. Their struggle is just the same as literally anything else someone could be navigating. Someone struggling to tell the truth all the time, same thing. Somebody struggling to look at heterosexual porn, same thing. Somebody struggling with eating too much or drinking or smoking or whatever your issue is, it's the same thing. If we start to relate to them as if it's a bigger issue, they're not actually going to stick it out. They're going to feel like, wow, I might be too much. I kind of mentioned this one already, but we don't want to just say, hey, go pray about that. You and Jesus just need to talk about that. They've had years, most of them, years of talking to the Lord about it, begging God to take it away. By the time they're coming to you saying go pray about it says, I'm not willing to be a part of this process. Telling them just to have a demon, also not helpful. Treating them as if they're unsafe around the same sex, children, or you, not helpful. Don't assume that a dorm or a locker room situation is going to be a hard situation for them. We want to have deeper conversation. What is triggering? What is helpful or not helpful for you? But I worked with YWAM for years, and I had a student several years ago who I knew was navigating this issue, and so he's living in a dorm setting, and I happen to know that house, all of the guys are running around in their underwear all the time. And so I just kind of pulled him aside one time. I was like, hey, how is that for you? Let's ask a question. Let's not assume. Just, hey, how is that? And he responded, he's like, it has been incredible. He's like, I feel so safe and so trusted. I feel like one of the guys. And I went, I am so glad that is the case, because now I don't have to go have some hard conversations with some of my staff and tell them how they need to maybe shift things around a little bit without completely changing a cultural dynamic that doesn't necessarily have to change. But don't just assume that it's a hard thing. Sometimes feeling like a part of the guys or the girls is actually the very thing that's going to bring a little bit of healing in their life, because maybe they never felt that before. Okay. Oh, somehow I've lost where I was. Okay, final one is just don't focus just on sexuality. We're going to talk about that this afternoon. But if your focus is only ever on the issue itself, here's how you're struggling, you're not going to see any freedom. Because what we look at, we're spending all of our time there. I wasted years of my life just focusing on that part of my life. And then all of a sudden I get my eyes on Jesus and things start to shift. It's a discipleship process. We'll talk about that this afternoon. I just want to say a couple things real fast on a scriptural side of things too, is there's so much hope for this issue. Like, Jesus has solutions and answers to every single thing that we face. And we don't have to feel overwhelmed or afraid of that process, because he does it every time. He shows up, he meets us in whatever we're going through. And a verse that I love is just that John 10:10 talks about the thief coming to steal, kill, and destroy, but he came to give us life abundantly. And I just want to say, life abundantly doesn't look like struggling with something for the rest of your life. That's not abundant life. That's survival. But that's not who Jesus is. And I think if we really look closely at the scripture, you'll find countless passages where the Lord is speaking to what he's able to do, how he's able to meet us, regardless of our situation. So that's my encouragement to you, is take some time as you're reading through the word. Just, God, what are you saying about any struggle today? What are you saying you'll do? Who will you be? Because he really is that good. He really is who he says he is, and he really will do what he says he'll do. So I'm going to hand it back to Ken for the rest of his talk this morning.